Welcome to Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. I'm Steve Swatt with the Sacramento Report. In the next few minutes, we're going to take a closer look at state spending on prisons. My guest this segment is Chris Hoene, who's the Executive Director of the California Budget Project. Thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here.
So let's start off, the Budget Project. I mean, you analyze the state budget from a slightly different perspective than others analyze it, correct?
Right. We engage in analysis of state budget and policy issues with the goal of trying to improve the outcomes of those public policies for low-income folks in California.
Mm-hmm. And I know you recently released a report on prison spending.
Right.
Tell us in a nutshell what your findings were.
Yeah, so this year, California will spend about $10 billion on corrections, or prisons, in short. That number has more than tripled as a share of the state budget in the last 3 decades. And despite efforts to reduce the prison population under a court order the last couple of years, prison spending in this year's budget is actually increasing by a little again. And so the report sort of raises the issue that we could be spending those dollars in other areas and investing in ways that might be helping other folks in the state.
Why is spending going up? Because as you mentioned, under the governor's realignment, we are reducing our prison population. Right. Much of that is going to the locals, into the jails, but spending has increased, I think, was by $1 billion over last year.
Right, by about $1 billion.
So what gives?
A lot of it has to do with costs related to staffing and employees, the folks who work in the prisons, and healthcare costs in terms of providing healthcare to the prisoners themselves, which have more than tripled in the last decade.
So if you were advocating for lower socioeconomic groups, as you do, mm-hmm. You would like to see a retrenchment in terms of spending on prisons, correct?
Right. There's loads of evidence that essentially shows that the spending on prisons is hurting us in a couple ways. One, it's reducing the available pool of funds we could be putting into things like K through 12 education and higher education, which create opportunity for a lot more Californians. For folks who are in the prisons themselves, a lot of whom are in there for fairly minor offenses, it's also producing scenarios where they get out and we're not putting enough into the arenas that might help them become more productive citizens and not end up back in prison, which is also what's driving the costs over time.
So we're looking at individuals that perhaps are responsible for minor offenses,
right.
And yet the state is paying $62,000 a year for their incarceration.
Right.
You would remove them from the prisons by changing the sentencing laws?
You could change the sentencing laws so that you're reducing the sentence for those minor offenses so that folks aren't getting a felony, for instance, for many drug possessions, or instead getting a misdemeanor. And you could reduce the sentences in some respects so that they're not serving as long a term for some of these minor offenses as well.
Couldn't that, though, overwhelm the local communities with the jails? That's where these folks would go.
Well, there is, under realignment, which occurred several years ago, there is a sort of transfer of some of the services and the revenues that go with them from the state to deal with some of this at the county jail level. That's certainly creating some challenges at the county level. But even at the local level, what we need to do is reinvest in some of the services that are actually helping folks be more productive in the community when they get out. Most of the folks mm-hmm. in those county jails are serving very short sentences, or they're actually awaiting sentencing. And so when they get out, a lot of times they're not sentenced to jail. They need help, like access to health care services, workforce development, child care, so that they don't end up back in prison.
All right. Well, it's an interesting subject. Thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. Chris Hoene of the California Budget Project. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks to our viewers also for watching Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. A reminder, you can see this and other interviews on YouTube, also on My Government on Demand. I'm Steve Swatt. Have a great day.